All good? All right. Took a little while, but here we are. I just want to welcome everyone to this very special panel on Jewish resistance fighters in Nazi-occupied Holland. My name is Dr. Elke Weesjes, and I'm the director of the Kingsborough Holocaust Center. This event is particularly close to my heart, and I'd like to tell you. I want to tell you how it came about. So during the Second World War, my grandfather and my great-grandfather hid Jewish and non-Jewish people on their respective farms in the east of the Netherlands. My mother, who was born just after the war, remembers playing hide and seek in the room my grandfather had built in the attic of his farm. There between the hay bales was a hidden room, hidden door to a small room where people hid from the Nazis and their Dutch collaborators. My grandfather never discussed any of the details with his children, and they never asked. All they knew was that there were people in hiding on the farm. And my grandfather didn't think his efforts were heroic. He actually referred to it as his Christian duty and didn't seek praise or recognition. Not talking about the war wasn't unusual in the 1950s, when people in the Netherlands looked to the future and wanted to rebuild a devastated country instead of dwelling on the past. As you can imagine, this attitude wasn't always easy for those who came back from the concentration camps. The wall of silence eventually crumbled over the course of the 1960s and 1970s. My grandfather, unfortunately, he had a massive stroke when I was about 10 or 11 years old, and he ended up in a wheelchair. He passed away a few years later, and I never got the chance to talk to him about the war. Later, I became a historian, and over the years, I've published extensively about Dutch resistance fighters. And I obviously wanted to know more about my own family's history. So about a year ago, as I was talking to my mother, she recalled that a man named Meijer Godschalk, a cattle dealer and a friend of my grandfather's, would visit the farm, and that the two men would talk about the war. And she didn't understand what it was all about, but she recalls that these conversations seemed very intimate and they were very long. So when I Googled the name, I got really excited that I finally got some kind of evidence, something to work with. So I got this name and I Googled the name Meijer Godschalk. And I came across a news article published in the Defense Krant, a publication issued by the Dutch Ministry of Defense. It described how Martijn Brandjes, an architectural historian, stumbled upon a collection of documents at a house he was working at in the south of Amsterdam. These documents mentioned the Jacks family as the former residents of the property. And as an amateur genealogist, Martijn's wife, Linda Brandjes, knew her way around the national and regional archives. And together with her husband, they delved into the history of the Jacks family, which was also a Jewish family. In 4 years, the pair built up a thick file on Wout Jacks, who joined the Dutch resistance during the Nazi occupation. And it is through this research that they stumbled upon the name Meijer Godschalk, another Jewish resistance fighter and a friend of Wout. Together with the Ministry of Defense, Linda and Martijn ensured that both Meijer and Wout were posthumously nominated for an award for their bravery. In May of 2022, Meijer and Wout's sons, Moshe Godschalk and Rob Jacks, accepted these awards in an official ceremony. Now, Moshe wasn't able to confirm whether my grandfather and his father worked together, though it seems very plausible, as Meijer was actively involved in finding hiding places for Jewish people and also had an extensive network of farmers due to his job as a cattle dealer. In the period 1942 to 1945, some 25,000 Jewish people and 300,000 non-Jewish people were hidden in the Netherlands. Hiding people in urban areas was difficult, not in the least because food shortages were more severe in cities than in the countryside. Therefore, many people were hidden on farms, away from the public eye. Sometimes farming families that had helped those in need were officially recognized and named the righteous among the nations. Others were not. It is quite a process, by the way, to be named a righteous among the nations, a process usually put in motion by survivors. Unfortunately, there were very few Dutch survivors, Dutch Jews who survived the war. As today's panel shows, there's still so much to uncover that helps us understand what happened during the Second World War. When I teach the history of the Holocaust here at Kingsborough, I lecture about Jewish resistance. People are often under the impression that there wasn't any resistance at all, but this is far from true. Jews fought the Germans and their collaborators in the forests of Eastern Europe and the ghettos of Poland. They fought in resistance movements in the West with Tito in Yugoslavia and side by side with Soviet partisans. Even in the death camps of Birkenau and Treblinka, Jews resisted with force. In Auschwitz, a crematorium was blown up and escapes were organized, and a large uprising occurred in Sobibor, where 200 prisoners broke free. Meijer Godschalk and Wout were just two of these heroic fighters, and may their memory be a blessing. Researchers Linda and Martijn Brandjes will start the panel, they're on Zoom, with their presentation, followed by Moshe, and then followed by Rob Jacks, who's here in person, who flew in from Canada, especially to be here today. So very exciting. The talks are followed then with a Q&A with the audience. And for those of you who are listening to this panel online, I'd like you to mute your microphones. And if you have questions for the speakers, please leave your questions in the chat box. So this event is recorded and will be made available on our website at a later date. Linda and Martijn, the floor is all yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Elke. Okay, we should be able to share our screen. At first, maybe it's nice to introduce ourselves.
Yeah, I am Martijn Brandjes. I'm an architectural building historian.
My name is Linda Brandjes. I'm married to Martijn. I'm a nurse practitioner in real life, and in by hobby, I'm an amateur genealogist. And these skills we combine together by doing this research. I will show you our presentation and we'll take you through it. And there it is.
Assuming that it is visible, I will start and Linda will take over halfway. Well, like Elke said, my journey started by doing research on a 17th century building in the historical town called Hoorn in the north of Holland. It was a part of my study, and the lady who lived there lived a solitary life, had very little contact. The building came empty when she was passed away, and with permission I did my research in the building. There I found a cabinet, and in the cabinet I found a personal archive. And by researching this archive, normally I try to find pictures of a building or official documents that tells me something about the history of a building. But this time I found in the cabinet this personal archive. I was allowed to take it with me, otherwise it would be taken away. And yeah, one of the things I found was a personal passport with swastikas on it, so I knew I had something historical special. We would love to see the next dia. how does it work?
Ah, here it is.
We have the next one. Well, I assembled 2 garbage bags full of historical documents, not historical archived, just one big pile of papers. And these papers were all dated between 1940 and 1945. As you can see, the period where it goes about, was clear to me. This man called Cornelis Bakker, he was a Nazi participant, and he worked at an airplane factory in 1942, so we knew for sure he was making a lot of money also. And what he did, we found out he bought houses, and these were empty houses of Jewish families who were deported already. And one of these houses we found information on was the Patroklerstraat 24I in Amsterdam. Okay, but okay, as a researcher, why not try Google at first? What we found was an online Jewish memorial at a memorial site, and only some names. As you can see, now there are pictures. In 2011, when I did my research, there were only names. And we strongly felt there must be a story about this family. So we felt like, let's do some extra research on it. At the time, the website was pretty basic, and I shared some information I already have on this website. A father, a mother, a son, and a daughter, and a grandmother. That was the family Jacks. This site directed us to a Jewish cemetery where, in 1951, a memorial was erected to commemorate the Amsterdam Jews. Their names, Julius, Else, Susie, Ruth, and Evelyn, the grandmother, were chiseled in stone. On the same memorial, we found Anne Frank and her family. Anne Frank, well known, of course, but this family Jacks, for me, they were anonymous persons. Searching for demographic information was the easy part for an amateur genealogist like Linda. But we were wondering, who were these people living at the Patroklerstraat? What kind of lives did they live? What were their hopes? What were their dreams? Every answer led to new questions. We will take you step by step through our findings and the so-called snowball effect of our research. The question we are asked a lot is, what kept you going to go further and further in this research for the family? Well, I'll tell you. I directly found a connection with Anne Frank and Susie Ruth Jacks. Anne Frank is for almost 10 years part of my life. I've been to the Anne Frank house. I worked for the Anne Frank house as an historian. We've been to Westerbork, and I felt deeply connected to Anne Frank. And then there was this girl, Susie Ruth Jacks. And I realized, who knows Susie Ruth Jacks? There are many parallels between Susie Ruth Jacks and Anne Frank. Both girls were forced to flee Germany with their families in 1938 and grew up in a neighborhood in the south of Amsterdam. It's not unthinkable they had known each other, as their age difference was small. Maybe they bumped into each other at school, played with each other on the street after school, it's all very possible. Then we visited the Hollandse Schouwburg in Amsterdam. Once before the war, it was a theater, but then the Hollandse Schouwburg was seized by the Nazis as an assembly point for Jews and for the administration. From July 1942, Jews were ordered to report for deportation and were assembled here. Today it's a memorial and an info center for all the victims of the Holocaust. At the Hollandse Schouwburg, we found a booklet that contained all the information about the deported and murdered Jewish, Roma, and Sinti children during World War II. Again, Susie Ruth, her name, we found it there in the archive, and another confirmation and a confrontation of how this young girl and all the other young children were deported and they were murdered eventually. There we found very little details like train numbers and transportation dates, and it makes it all very, very vivid. Okay, let's zoom in on the city archives. On the Amsterdam Archive website, it shows us two results when I was looking for Susie Ruth. First, there's a citizen census card with her basic personal information. We also found another document that mentioned her name. Susie Ruth reported the theft of her scooter in the year 1943. The report states that it was a red scooter with black handles. It was stolen from the street called Groenburgwal in the city of Amsterdam. Located here was a children's daycare during that time, run by the Jewish Council, where Susie Ruth worked. At the age of 16, she helped taking care of the younger children. That tiny bit of evidence gave us a glimpse of who she was. And for us, that's the gold we want to find. Susie didn't leave behind a diary. She did lose a scooter, and through this bit of little evidence, we learned that she was a kind, caring person, went through the city of Amsterdam on her little red scooter. We did this search also for the other family members. And we found out that Julius Jacks was a partner in the fur workplace and a fur shop called Citybond, located in the city center of Amsterdam. As we were getting to know this family, the family Jacks, we only became more and more eager to find out more. Realize by knowing personal info, this unknown family becomes a part of yourself. You feel injustice and realize that they earned not to be forgotten. We want to give them their respect by reconstruct their lives, but yet not yet knowing what to do with it. Anne Frank is known all over the world, but who calls out the name of Susie Ruth Jacks?
Let's look into the family Jacks. I've made a short overview to show you the family tree. It's Julius and Else in the middle. They became a married couple in 1921 in Berlin. And as Martijn told you already, they had to flee Berlin and Germany in 1938. They came direct to Amsterdam with their two children, Max Walter Jacks and Susie Ruth Jacks. Max was the oldest, and he's the only survivor of the Holocaust of this family. We used the citizen census cards, and we were able to draft this first outline. As an amateur genealogist, I am always a little bit curious. I'd like to do some research, be a little private investigator. And I was infected by Martijn, his research. And I came along with all his visits to the memorial site, to the Hollandse Schouwburg. And so we started working together. There are a few very important websites to visit when you will do some investigation. And one of those sites are the Arelson archives. It's an important website, and it shows us the Red Cross cards from this family. Like I said, the only family member that survived the Holocaust was Max Walter, and the rest of the family was arrested, deported, and murdered in May 1943. The information about their deportation is on their respective Red Cross cards to be found in the Arelson archives. These cards contain a lot of information. In the blue writing, you see that's in the right corner. The dates show us when they were concentration camp Westerbork. It's a transit camp. In red writing, the big pencil writing on the front, it says that they were transported to, in their case, to Sobibor extermination camp. And that's on the same day as they came on in Westerbork. We found brief cards. The brief cards, the postcards told us, that's from acquaintances from this family, that they were only 10 hours in Westerbork, and then they were transported to Sobibor. We know a few days later they were murdered. Do you remember the stolen scooter of Susie Ruth? She reported it stolen in the early March 1943, and only 6 weeks later, the half of May 1943, her whole family was brutally murdered. We know these people don't live anymore, but it was important for us to see, are there any living relatives? We went looking for relatives. We have an important Dutch site, newspaper archival website. It's called Delver. And we found information out about Max Walter Jacks, the only living son of this family. Let's see what we found out about Max Walter. We found his obituary in the newspapers, and we discovered that he went by the name Wout. Wout was married to Mia Bolk, and he was the director of a fashion company named Viroja Mode. We continued our research using the names Jacks and Bolk, and we found out that Mia and Wout had a son called Robert Jules Jacks, and Rob will tell his story later this afternoon. Martijn searched Facebook, and he stumbled upon Rob Jacks. He was born in Amsterdam and currently living in Winnipeg, Canada. But yeah, how do you contact a person about their family tragic Holocaust experiences? You say something like, "Hi, we did, and we found this and we found that. Are you interested?" Well, it's not very surprising, but in our first communication over Facebook Messenger, Rob was apprehensive. He was grateful for our research, but he indicated that he wanted to concentrate on the future instead of dwelling on the past. As we had spent a tremendous amount of time on this research, we decided to take a break and focus on our own lives. We fast forward for about 6 years. In 2020, Rob's son, David, he contacted us out of the blue, and this gave us the encouragement to take our research to a whole nother level. David was eager to learn more about his family. He was very interested in our research, and every little detail we shared that felt relevant for him. And David had done his own research. And by combining his research and our research, there are blanks that filled in. Finally, some photos. The people we were reading about got their, we finally see their faces. David shared some family pictures with us. This picture shows us the mother Else, the father Julius, and their first baby Max Walter. We know him now as Wout. There's a picture of Lily Jacks with Susie Ruth in the middle and a friend playing, being happy. And there's Max Walter again with his grandmother, Evelyn. Evelyn came with the family to Amsterdam, and his little sister, Susie Ruth. Here we have a picture of Max Walter, of Wout, with his mother Else and his sister Susie Ruth. And maybe you can recognize the building in the background. This picture is taken in the Patroklusstraat. Most likely, at the moment, they moved in to this building. They were happy. They were felt in a safe place at that time, and that it could be the picture for family or friends abroad. This heb ik gehad. Ja, oké. Martijn takes over.
I will take over. Max Walter Jacks, please call me Wout. As Max Walter was, of course, a very German sounding name, and Wout was very Dutch. David also shared 2 post-war photos with us. In the first picture, we see Wout posing with his uncle Erich, brother of his father Julius, and Aunt Rose Jacks Rosenberg. These people were in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp and supported some of their orphaned nieces and nephews after they returned from the concentration camps. They have their own story to tell, but that's for another time. We noticed Wout wearing a military uniform, so this got us curious. When did he join the military and what did he do? Again, new info. This military uniform means new research options to dig into. So let's continue. I have connections with the Dutch army, and I have a friend working there as an official that has access to the military personnel archives. So I asked him for some help. And he did also some research for my great uncle who fought during World War II at the same time. We were stunned to find out that Wout joined the Dutch temporary army, called Binnenlandse Strijdkrachten in Dutch, before the war was ended. What's the story here? And what was he doing in the town called Borculo? It's not even near Amsterdam, so more new questions to be answered. Looks like we have to focus on that area and this location to see what we can find out. Sharing these little results like this military uniform and the location called Borculo, we shared these findings with Rob. And Rob, all his memories were triggered and could add new information from his memory. And that helped us a lot to make a complete story about his military history. Okay.
Yes. We told David, the grandson of Wout, we were looking into his grandfather's service records. And David said, well, I have some information because I got in contact with Moshe Godschalk. He's a son of Meijer Godschalk. At first, we were a little for how relative could it be? But Meijer had some wartime memories. He put them in writing, and David sent us the copy of that. We looked into the story that Meijer wrote. Meijer was born in Borculo. It's the same little town again. Meijer wrote about his hiding in a farm in Borculo. He was also part of a Dutch resistance group. We were stunned to read that Meijer wrote about meeting in hiding about Jacks, and also recalling several armed resistance actions. We looked into Meijer just like a Google search, and we found information at the Dutch Cultural Courtier website, and there is a form that shows us that also Meijer was a member of the Dutch Temporary Defense Army, de Nederlandse Binnenlandse Strijdkrachten. So it shows that they had similarities. They were together. So we had to go to Borculo, but Borculo, it was a little bit difficult. Maybe you recall in 2020 there was something like a COVID pandemic and you couldn't visit any archives. But remember, there are so many helpful and willing people when it comes to consulting the archives. During this COVID pandemic, we weren't able to visit the archives in person, so I emailed them instead. The local archive regarding Borculo and the near region responded quickly. They advised us to get in contact with the Historical Association of Borculo. What they discovered for us was more than we could dream of. Because who could imagine that this was the place to reveal the resistance work of these two Jewish guys, all in published writing. At first, they sent us some scans of the pages regarding Wout and Meijer. But fortunately, I was able to retrieve these second-hand books and to see with my own eyes what was written. Here you see the farm when they were where they were in hiding, the farm of the family Hesselink. And in the book, there's a quote, and the quote, and I translated it to English. There are two Jewish men in hiding named M. Godschalk and W. Jacks. They were active participants of the resistance in Borculo. They were located at Koldman, the name of the farm, and took part of several actions. During the liberation, they were part of the Dutch Temporary Army. Both men are mentioned several times in this book, and it's written about only the wartime. They stayed at the farm of the family Hesselink, and the oldest son, Bertus Hesselink, he was head of the resistance in that area. The men didn't go in hiding, waiting to be liberated. No, they actively joined the local resistance group. They were couriers. They were told to handle a rifle. One time, they got in contact with some German soldiers. They had to give up their bikes, but they were bold. They tried to negotiate with the German soldiers to get at least 4 cigars for the bikes. Both men, of course, had some false identity cards. Wout went under the name of Jan Lakerman, and Meijer went under the name Wilhelmus van der Pangaard. Multiple times they were stopped at checkpoints of German soldiers, but these men, they had great courage and could overcome their fear over and over again. We will make a little sidestep because we also visited the National Archives in The Hague, because there are important dossiers, important archives, and this archive we wanted to see was about the dossier of the shop of the father of Wout, called Julius Jacks. The shop was called City Bond, also known as Bargas & Co. Bargas was his companion of Julius Jacks. And it was a very big file and a lot of correspondence in it. And everything was regarding the occupation of the Nazis, how they confiscated the workplace. And after the war, Wout and his uncle Erich tried to regain ownership of this company. Unfortunately, the organization had to do right to all Holocaust victims and didn't comply. A couple of years later, they offered Wout a position as company chef, but Wout was disappointed. He turned the offer down. Know that at this time, Wout was stateless until 1951. It took him many years to get his Dutch citizenship. In this big pile of letters, there are many statements by important people. And these statements helped us again to see how important the resistance work was that Wout and Meijer did. There are statements from the mayor of Borculo, statements from his troop sergeant, and also statements from his army chief, and that dates until 1947. Important information for us as researchers to put everything in perspective.
Well, let's go back to the military service records we found. With the help of my friend Moshe, who works at the Dutch military, we already retrieved the military service records of Wout, as you see above. With permission of the Godschalk family, we also dug up the military service records of Meijer. Meijer and Wout together went from the resistance fighting group to join the temporary Dutch army. Meijer had an important role in the Jewish Council. Due to circumstances, Meijer wasn't able to participate more than a few weeks. After we had found enough formal evidence of Wout and Meijer being active resistance fighters and serving in the Dutch temporary army, we applied for the official procedure for being awarded military medals posthumously. We had close conversation with both families, the Jacks and the Godschalks, before we applied for the decorations for Meijer and Wout. Both families were a little hesitant at first. Their fathers weren't that big of decorations and medals, but the recognition for their heroic deeds and the meaning of for the younger generation was their common ground. So we helped them apply for the decoration, and of course, both men were entitled to receive their decoration posthumously. Too bad the pandemic delayed the getting together. But last year, finally, it was possible to organize this special day. Every year on the 10th of May, there is a commemoration called the Battle of the Residents near The Hague. It's a gathering of veterans and other high-ranking military people. On this day, there is being held a ceremony to hand out posthumously several medals and distinctions to relatives of people who contributed to defend our country and our freedom worldwide. On the 10th of May 2022, Meijer and Wout were awarded posthumously for their contribution to the liberation of the Netherlands. Family from all over the world attended this ceremony. It was the first time we meet each other in person with the whole group. Two families, two researchers not knowing each other, meeting all live at this moment, but we were all linked by their heroic fathers. This gathering was a joyful and very memorable day for us. Not only we got to meet all these wonderful people in person, but my family joined also. this ceremony because my great uncle also received posthumously a medal for serving in the Dutch army when the Germans attacked Holland. It turned out after discussing that my family, the Brandjes family, my grandparents had known Wout and his wife Mia, and they were mutual friends. This day we shared stories. We were able to tell more about the findings to both families, Godschalk and Jax. The Mobilization War Cross. It was established on 11th of August 1948 by the royal decree of the Queen Wilhelmina. Those eligible for the award include military personnel who served for at least 6 months between 6th of April 1939 and 20th of May 1940. However, the cross can also be awarded to non-military personnel or people who did not serve full 6 months, as long as the subject performed military tasks for the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And then, of course, when getting together, we had to visit all the personal places. Rob and his son stayed a few more days with their best friend. This gave us the opportunity to visit some ground their ancestors walked in the 1940s. We took a picture with Rob and his sons on the exact same location as Susie, Else, and Wout took it in the 40s. I told them, look at the doorknob, they are still original, still there. If you touch them, there must be a connection to be felt. After this very special meeting on this location, we, as I wrote, completing the circle, we finished our get-together at the grave of Wout, the man who showed courage together with his friend Meijer. He fought for freedom and their lives' right to live. David recited the Jewish prayer, the Kaddish, and we all said goodbye to our friends. And I say friends, but they feel like family to us.
Oh. Yes. We want to finish with some lessons learned. Maybe to motivate you to do something yourself. The first one is listen to your gut feeling. Your gut tells you about 80% about what you think, what you feel. But when you feel something is important, then act to it because it's worth it. The second lesson is be helpful. Even if it doesn't concern you as an individual, it doesn't mean it's not important. So connect with others and feel their needs. Don't expect something in return, and maybe it doesn't turn out the way you feel, but if you'll be helpful, it's always appreciated. Be daring, be bold, but do it respectfully, of course. And go out of your comfort zone sometimes. It's where the gems are to be found. Maybe write a postcard, be old-fashioned, and see what it brings you. It brought us to Westerbork postcards and got us some great meetings with people we didn't know. It was very wonderful. Sometimes also with all this history and all this mostly sad information, sometimes take a break. And we also learned from Rob and from Moshe, you can let it rest for a while because this history is almost 80 years old. So a few months, more or less, won't have that massive impact. The history is already written. It just has to be found. And that's also what happened here. Also, taking a break helps you to reflect and to understand your findings. Sometimes you read again and you see something new information in old findings. It helps you to think about your next step. And then we're almost at the end of our journey, but there is some tiny bit of future. Here in the Netherlands and in Europe, we have an artist that's making stolpersteinen. It's a German word. It's, if you rephrase it, stumbling stones. And these stones will be placed in the sidewalk in front of the door of where Holocaust victims have lived. They've been taken away. So their names will be noticed. And maybe people will stand still, they read their name, they say their name maybe out loud, and so these people will be remembered. The stolpersteinen for the family jacks are ready, they are made, and they're ready for placement at the Patroklostraat. You only have to find a date with the family.
Linda.
Yes?
Okay, we really have.
Chat.
Oh. Thanks.
Okay, 2 times. Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Yes, but I think we're ready now. So you can take back and I will stop the sharing. So, okay. So I will give the word back to Helen or to Elke, and they can get Moshe so he can do his story.
Linda, if you could make Moshe host, that would be great.
Uitbouwen. Oh, why is it not working? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's my turn now. You all hear me? Okay, great. Well, thanks. First of all, thanks Linda and Martijn for bringing us together, and thanks to Elke for organizing this panel. I'll first start my presentation, which is somewhere. Where is it? Oh, here. Yeah. Okay, so I'll talk about my father, Meijer Godschalk, about his life before, during, and after the Shoah, and something about what influence it had on my life and life of my brothers. First of all, I'll start with an overview of the life, kind of a CV of my father. He was born in 1915 in Borculo, and you now all know that this is in the eastern part of the Netherlands. His parents were Moses Godschalk and Gesina Meijer. And he had two older brothers, twin brothers, Hartog and Magiel. And in his family, also within his greater family, he is the only survivor of the Holocaust. He married Hetty Samuel, my mother, in 1947. And they got 4 sons, Moshe, that's me, Salo, Harry, and Benny, who is in the audience. They lived in Deventer, which is also in the eastern part of the Netherlands, but a bit closer to Amsterdam, from the time they married in 1947 until 1970. And then they moved to Israel. They lived in Netanya. Meijer lived there from 1970 till 1978. And tragically, he died in 1978, January 10, which is less than a month before Walter Jax died. And the cause of his death was a car accident. You've seen this this picture before. This is the family, Meijer's family. Meijer was born and raised in a Jewish family, together with his older twin brothers. Already from a young age, Meijer Godschalk, who is the young and handsome guy at the right, earned a living from the cattle trade and acquired many contacts with farmers and traders. The family also owned an abattoir, a slaughterhouse for cattle, and here you see Meijer in the middle, and with his father and the oldest of the twin brothers. Actually, the most exciting incident in his youth was a tornado that hit Borculo and adjacent villages, leaving many houses and other buildings damaged, as was the house of his family. Here are his parents and grandfather in front of the ruin. Meijer was politically aware and realized the emerging danger of growing anti-Semitism through contacts across the German border and from refugees seeking shelter in the Netherlands. During the large razzia, Nazi roundup, on October 8, 1941, in the Achterhoek, which is the area, the eastern part of the Netherlands, where he lived, he and his childhood friend Richard Meijer fled north, where they found shelter at a hiding place in the northern province of Friesland. There they stayed for a period of 4 months until the end of January 1942. In that same period, the Germans started to inventorize all possessions of Jews. And in 1942, these possessions and businesses were expropriated. After returning to Borculo, he met Walter Jax. Together, they went on to fight the enemy until the bitter end of the war. They made contact with Rudolf Cohen of the Association for Professional Training of Palestine Pioneers in Deventer, thus establishing contacts together in order to escape the grip of the Germans. Meijer, Godschalk, and Walter Jax were recruited by the JCB, the Jewish Vocational Training Center in Amsterdam, and were appointed to place Jewish men on farms to work in the fields in order to delay for them an early call to the camps. Both Rudolf Cohen in Deventer and the JCB advised them to ignore the orders of the Joodse Raad, of the Jewish Council. As a result of their work for the JCB, both Meijer, Godschalk, and Walter Jax came into possession of false IDs. Meijer received papers by the name of Wilhelmus van der Pangaert, you've seen that before in the previous presentation, and a Speer stamp to allow them to stay out of forced labor. These documents saved their lives several times. Through contacts with members of the resistance, they were given assignments and tasks, including finding hiding places for Jews who had been called up for transport, issuing voucher cards, and transferring money. Unfortunately, they convinced only a few not to go to the camps. Most Jews adhered to the advice of the Jewish Council to obey the orders of the Germans. Only few Jews believed the rumors that the labor camps they were to be sent to were actually extermination camps. It was during this time that Meijer, Godschalk and Walter Jax, together with Hendrik Huizing, were involved in an assault on a distribution office for ration stamps to get hold of ration cards for the benefit of hidden Jews. Food was scarce and could only be bought by handing in a ration voucher. As hidden persons didn't exist officially, they had no ration vouchers. In 1943, just before all Jews had to leave Borculo, Meijer succeeded in finding a hiding place for his parents and aunt in a farm just north of the city. But later that year, he heard that the three were caught there, beaten up, brought to Westerbork transition camp, and from there transported to Auschwitz, where they were killed. Meijer and Walter helped many other members of the Jewish community to find a hiding place. After all Jews were deported from Borculo or went into hiding, the two left Borculo and found a hiding place in the vicinity. Later on, they moved together to other hiding places for safety reasons. From there, they were active in raids across the German border. Between others, they stole cows and smuggled the meat in milk tankers to centers from where it was divided among Jews in hiding. They also got other assignments. Between others, they sabotaged train tracks in the area. They placed barbed wire or nails on main roads used by the German army. They stole bikes that were earlier confiscated by the Germans. Bikes were important for resistance workers, as this was for them the safest way of travel and transportation. They saved pilots of downed Allied aircrafts, supplied them with civil clothing, and guided them to safe houses. They also were active during weapon droppings by Allied forces meant for the Dutch resistance. A week before the liberation of Eastern Netherlands, in the middle of March 1945, they joined the temporary domestic Dutch army, the BS, the Binnenlandse Strijdkrachten, arrested German soldiers and also fleeing members of Dutch NSB Nazi Party. On April 1st, and I don't think this is a joke, on April 1st, 1945, they brought 70 prisoners to the Borculo City Hall. After liberation, Meijer was informed that his parents, brother, and their spouses and almost all his greater family had been murdered in concentration camps. Also, Walter Jax here heard that his parents and younger sister had been murdered all on the same day in 1943. Meijer initially returned to live in Borculo. In 1947, he married Hetty Samuel, sister of his pre-war friend Moshe Samuel. The Samuels, just like Meijer's family, were cattle dealers, as were many other families in that part of the Netherlands. They raised 4 sons, of which I happen to be the first and the tallest. Meijer and Hetty were very much aware of the importance for the Jewish people to have a national home of their own, not only in view of what happened during the Holocaust, but also because they were afraid that the many crises during the 50s and the 60s might cause new waves of anti-Semitism. In 1970, they moved to Israel. In the same period that the 3 younger sons fulfilled their military service, Meijer joined the Israeli Civil Defense Force. And you see him here in his uniform. Only after he died, in 1978, we discovered his written recollections of the war, as he had to write them down to file for a pension for resistance fighters. In the same period, we also found a box with letters and postcards which he received from his brother, Hartog, and his wife, Betsy, sent to him from the transition camp Westerbork. The last few letters were thrown from the train that brought them to Auschwitz. Some good people searched for such letters along the train tracks and delivered them to the SRC. Hartog's last words to him read, "We hope to see each other again soon. We passed Zuidbroek." Zuidbroek is a city just before the German border. Another kiss from Hartog. I am very brave. Keep faith. Bye, all of Borculo. His own last letters to Hartog and Betsy were returned to sender, with the statement transported and returned to sender in Borculo. After the war ended, he received a cold message from the municipal citizen registration that his parents and many other relatives had been killed. All these experiences left a mental scar. Left a mental scar on my father. From the outside, he was a pleasant, humoristic person, being the center of many parties, rhyming songs for festive occasions, but internally he revived the Holocaust continuously and missed his parents very much. I often heard him shout in his sleep, "Oh, mother, please help me." Moreover, he felt lonely within the larger family of my mother. How did Meijer's experiences during the war influence us, his sons, and me in particular? All four of us agree. Not so much. Some of our contemporaries lived in families where continuously, on a daily basis, the Holocaust experiences of the parents were subject of every conversation. In other families, the opposite. No word about the Holocaust. In our home, the Holocaust was sometimes subject of conversations, but not too often. Our mother had been hidden and saved together with her parents and two younger brothers. Only her older brother, Mo Samuel, who was Meijer's pre-war friend, was murdered in Mauthausen. She was able to tell us about her war experiences. Our father discussed the Shoah, the Holocaust, but only in general subjects. But he almost never spoke about his own experiences and heroic resistance activities. I don't have the feeling that I suffer a second-generation syndrome, opposite to so many of my Jewish contemporaries. I thought so. Now, during the awful attack of Palestinians on Israeli citizens and its aftermath, I have the feeling that the Shoah is not so far away as I thought it to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moshe. That was I'm lost for words. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your father's story. I am aware of the fact that we don't have an awful lot of time left. I'm going to invite Rob Jacks to do the next talk. He's here in person. If you have to leave, then feel free to quietly leave the room. If you can stay, please stay so we can all join in on the Q&A. But I fully understand if you cannot. Thank you. Moshe, do you make Helen Nasser the co-host, please, or the host?
How do I do that?
So you just go next, yes, on, yes, there you go. Okay, are you able to do, are you doing that?
I'm
Helen?
doing this,
Okay,
yeah.
sorry, Helen is figuring it out, sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, there was like escape or something.
think, well,
Yeah, and then here.
yeah, but don't worry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's it. Then, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, now I can leave the code.
Oh, no, it's
Oh, no,
Ira.
not Ira, sorry, Ira.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming, people here and people in Zoom land, wherever they are. My name is Rob Jacks. I'm the son of Wout Jacks, who has been mentioned a number of times. And I'm married to Karen. I have two boys, Eli and David. I live in Winnipeg. Eli lives in Scotland. David is also in Winnipeg. So we're sort of spread out. I was invited by Elke to tell you how my father's story has impacted on my life. I don't really know where to start, but so I'll just talk a little bit about what my childhood was like, growing up in post-war Europe. I'm an old guy. I was born in '49, so it's only basically about 4 years after the war I was born. I grew up in Amsterdam as an only child. That's me. Not a lonely child. My dad and his family, they all came from Berlin in Germany, but he hardly ever talked about it. He hardly ever mentioned that. He did sing a few German songs, not very well, and I always told him to stop singing. And I mean, none of us Jackses are good singers, so it wasn't good. He tried to sing some German songs, as I said, from his past. And we all said, no, don't do that. My parents' flat was always open to absolutely everyone. I remember my dad, Wout, always saying that any friend of my son must be a good person and is therefore welcome in the house. In other words, I was seldom alone. When I was in high school, every Saturday was game day at the Jacks family. A bunch of my friends would come over and they play chess and backgammon and other kind of games. And my dad would supply the drinks. So maybe that's why all my friends were so eager to come to our house, because most of us were like underage. So my dad would supply drinks and my mom would continually come in with snacks. And all my friends called my parents Wout and Mia. And these remain really, really good memories. Another great memory was that we went traveling all over Europe in a tent, camping. And I was often allowed to bring a friend. So my childhood was really, really enriched because of my parents. And during this time, my dad hardly ever spoke about the war or his childhood. He told me a few anecdotes, and they were mentioned of how he and some other Jewish kids were hiding at a farm in the eastern part of the Netherlands during the German occupation. And one of those stories that reminds with me involved them hiding in manure in a trough behind the cows, where the cows did their business. At the end, there was a cesspit, and when there was word of a German razzia or a raid, the Jewish boys, they would jump into that manure and hide into, like my dad was saying, up to their noses in shit. That was, yeah, not good. Anyway, so shortly before my 13th birthday, my dad suggested I do bar mitzvah. I had no idea what that was, but apparently it involved getting presents. Oops. Why doesn't it go to the next slide? Oh, technology is whack.
Nice.
That work?
Okay, I think that we should just continue. Just
Yeah, well, skip the slides, okay.
Yeah, we saw a lot of the photos anyway.
Yeah, yeah, all right. So yeah, my parents, they talked about I should do bar mitzvah. I had no idea what it was, but presents were involved. So my best friend Eddie and I, we talked it over and both thought it would be good fun. We attended Hebrew classes with the rabbi of the liberal Jewish community and learned on lines and songs. Even then, religion was not a big part of the process. Our household was very secular, but also very political. My dad, oh, here we go. Yeah, my dad belonged to several progressive political organizations and always voted for the pacifist Socialist Party. He was a lifelong member of a trade union. When I asked him why a businessman like himself, and which he was as long as I can remember, would be such a lefty, he said that his mom, Else, in Berlin, was also a member of the Socialist Party. And he alluded at that time that was another reason why the family left Germany and Berlin, because Jews and socialists, being Jew and a socialist, was not a good combination in the late 30s in Germany. Initially, my grandfather, Julius, didn't want to leave Germany. He was a German World War, listen to this is bizarre. He was a German World War I veteran, fought for the Germans in the trenches. So he thought, I'm safe, I'm German, I fought for Germany. Nothing is going to happen to the family. Well, we know that was not good thinking. So as it turned out, the family needed to flee Germany to escape the increasing persecution of the Jewish population. So the family left Berlin for Amsterdam, where they arrived in January 1938. They felt that Amsterdam was a safe place since the Netherlands was neutral during World War I. And I'm quite sure that my uncle Eric, which was my grandfather's brother, encouraged them to flee Germany. He must have been in a position to help them with housing and help his brother find a job. My grandfather's brother Eric worked for Hoef, a chain of shoe stores in the Netherlands. Can you move this slide? Yeah, so here's the shoe store. Now, that was an important thing. As a shoemaker, when he was transported to Westerbork and a transition concentration camp, often the Germans wanted to keep skilled tradespeople in the camps to help them out. He was a shoemaker, so they had no real reason to send him on because he was repairing the boots for the Germans. So my uncle Eric, his job was quite high up in that shoe company. I remember my uncle Eric and his wife Rose very well. We got together quite often for suppers, and they didn't live far from us in a lovely area in Amsterdam, but I don't remember any of them ever talking about it. This may give you a little bit of an idea of the background of my early life. My journey back in time started about 15 years ago when I got a phone call from my second cousin, Lily, who was the daughter of my grandfather's sister. Okay, there's another slide there for a family tree. So this is Lily here. This is my grandfather. That's his brother. And that's the sister. So Lily was a second cousin for me. I got a phone call from her from this obviously older lady with a very strong New Jersey accent. She sounded like she came straight from The Sopranos or something like that. And she was like, "Hello, Robert." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Who are you?" She said, "I'm your cousin Lily." So it turns out that she had already, her family had escaped Berlin in 1939 straight to the States. I didn't know I had living relatives, let alone someone living in Jersey. How she found me, we still don't know. So my son and I, we traveled to New Jersey many times, and Lily had a number of photos of my family with people on it that I never had seen, and I didn't know who they were. But unfortunately, her memory at that time was fading, and she wasn't able to tell us very much. I'll be quiet. And certainly not about experience in the war. But these visits, they sort of sparked an interest in finding more about my family. She had pictures of my mom and dad and her mom and dad from when they visited the Netherlands in the 50s. I was in some of those pictures, and until then I had often wondered who these people were. I vaguely remember that visit. I was probably about 5 or 6, because they brought a plastic toy, and plastic in the early 50s was, I had never seen it. It was like a mystery material. Okay, you can click on. Yeah. So yeah, that's Lily's mom, that's my mom, and that's me when they visited in the Netherlands. So I remember, and as a matter of fact, I still have that toy, believe it or not. David found a number of documents that I was not aware of. Among other things, he found out that Julius's, my grandfather's synagogue, where he used to go in Berlin, had been destroyed. And Lily and her family left Berlin in 1939, excuse me, and boarded a ship in Rotterdam for New York. She told me how she witnessed Kristallnacht. I don't know if anyone knows what that is, but that's where things really started going bad in Germany. The stormtroopers were going down the streets, up and down the streets, breaking windows of Jewish businesses. So she witnessed it. She was going to school at that time, and she witnessed Kristallnacht. And her and a little friend, they escaped in the school. They went to the roof and somehow escaped while they were watching the stormtroopers destroy the streets below them. She also told us many times she was madly in love with my dad when she was a little girl. They were first cousins and must have visited each other quite often. My dad was 6 years older than Lily. She was only 10 at that time. She died last year at age 93. And Lily and my dad never saw each other after the war. Until Linda and Martijn contacted me 3 years ago, I still had very little idea what my dad was really all about. He was a very happy, kind, gentle man. Had a great sense of humor. He always had the latest jokes. He picked them up in the synagogue and in business. He was also very humble. And he had great empathy for all of those who were less fortunate than him. Okay, next. Yeah, that's my dad at a much, much younger age. But so, yeah, he had lots of empathy for those less fortunate, but little did I know how unfortunate he really was. Ever since I learned of all the information that Linda, Martijn, and Moshe have discovered, I've looked at my dad in a different light. I've been wondering how the murder of his family affected him deeply and how he was able to carry on almost as if nothing had happened. My dad traveled quite a bit for his business. He was in women's fashion to a few different places in the world. His business was mostly with German companies, and he therefore was in Germany quite a bit. And I recall asking him how he felt about going to Germany and talking to people who might have been Nazis. This is, again, in the 50s, so 10 years after the war. And yeah, I remember asking him, I said, what's it like doing business? These people may have been Nazis. They may be responsible for all the horrible things that was happening. He was quite vague about his answers and often just joked about it, saying, well, you know, the beer is really good. At the time, this made me quite angry, as I had strong anti-German feelings and expressed those feelings to him. In the Netherlands of the 50s and 60s, there was a general dislike of Germany and the German people, especially among my generation. In the late 50s, during many of our family trips to a beach resort near Amsterdam, I was always very upset that so many vacancy signs in that town's bed and breakfast were posted in German. It always said Zimmer frei, which means vacancy, room to rent. After all, it was not that long ago that town was occupied by the Nazis. I didn't understand the hospitality that was extended to German tourists. My dad never expressed his true feelings about Germany, but he did avoid buying German products, like a television or a car or radio. And that should have triggered something in me, should have raised the red flag that something was eating it. One of the very direct connections to the war and my dad's time in hiding that I experienced was our annual Christmas trip to visit my mom's family in the province of Limburg, which is in the south of Holland. On the way there, we always made a detour to the east near the German border. So try this one again. No, it doesn't work. There we visited a farmer, and you've seen this picture before, a farmer and his wife. They owned a very small dairy farm, and I recall sitting in the living room with my mom and dad, the farmers, and my parents would be served coffee and cookies, and I got a glass of milk and cookies. I don't recall, and this is so odd, I don't recall that ever any conversation took place. We were just sitting around at the kitchen table, eating milk and cookies, drinking milk and cookies. There was silence, but only the sound of mooing of cows and the meowing of a couple of cats. The smell was just horrendous. It was city boy, right? When on one visit, the farmer took me to the area where the cows were to show me where my dad had been hiding in the manure trough, I almost threw up. These are very vivid memories, actually. It wasn't until much later that I realized what an incredible ordeal that must have been. We visited every year for many years in a row, but why the visit stopped at one point, I don't know. Years later, I asked my dad why they never talked while we visited. My dad said there really was nothing to say. Everybody knew why they were there, and everything that needed to be said had been said before. To me, as a young kid, to me, these visits were strange. I was very young. Now I realize that this farmer had saved my dad's life and that of many others. The visits were just a small gesture of gratitude. Plus, I remember my dad would bring a nice coat for the farmer's wife from his collection, and we would get some butter. There's one other story that I recall my dad telling me, and this was the story that was corroborated by Meijer Godschalk. The story my dad told me was how the Jewish boys, and he never mentioned anyone by name as far as I can remember, how they took part in derailing German trains coming into the Netherlands. They were right at the German border near a German army camp, and army trains would come in. And my dad told me that at night they would go out and unscrew whatever they do, tracks, and lay them beside them. So the trains that would come in would derail with the German troops in it. That's just one of the few stories I remember. And at that time, I wasn't sure if I should believe him. After all, my dad was not an imposing man and very young. I simply could not imagine him doing anything so reckless. Little did I know. At the same time, I thought that was really cool. It's now 2023 and I'm far removed from my youth and my birthplace of Amsterdam. During the last couple of years, thanks to all the discoveries by Linda and Martijn, and also new information that my son David has discovered about the experiences of our extended family, things have started to paint a picture. Information about life of the extended Jacks family in Berlin is like the colors that complete pictures in a coloring book. And with this new info, I've started to look at my family in a different light. The culmination of all the research was that in May 2022, last year, my dad and Meijer Godschalk were posthumously honored for their role in the Dutch resistance. And Linda, Martijn, and Moshe talked about that. At last, 80 years after the events that earned them this honor, they were giving the recognition they deserved. In next two slides. So that's, oops. Well, here's the medals. That was me, that's Moshe, and this is an unknown who also got an award. My dad received 2 medals, and by the way, if everybody's interested afterwards, I have them here, and you can have a look at them. I also have my dad's military booklet. It's also there. You're more than welcome to have a look at it. My dad received 2 medals because he actually joined the army in 1945, to continue fighting on the Pacific Front against Japan. As a member of the Princess Irene Brigade, he was shipped to England for training to go to Southeast Asia to fight in the ongoing war against Japan. My dad had quite a big scar in his shoulder here. And I remember asking him once how he got that. And he told me that on the evening before his regiment was supposed to leave for Indonesia and the Far East, there was a friendly boxing match between different platoons. And my dad told me that his opponent was a very good boxer, and apparently my dad was not. And at one point, the guy hit my dad on his shoulder and broke his shoulder bone and kept hitting it over and over and over again. So my dad was basically standing in the ring with one arm hanging down. So that required extensive surgery, which ended up him not going to the Far East, and that probably saved his life. The Jacks boys, Eli, David, and me, we traveled to the Netherlands last year, where we finally met Linda and Martijn and Moshe. And this was very, very emotional for me. Yep, next slide, please. In fact, that's the group there. That's my son Eli from Scotland, David, me, Linda, Martijn, Naftali, Moshe, and Moshe's brother. So we finally met in Holland. In fact, the whole trip was an emotional roller coaster. There were many moments of pride and pure joy that brought back my dad momentarily. There were also many moments of anger towards Germany and the Nazis, but also anger towards post-war Dutch government. And this is sort of bubbling more and more inside of me, that anger of post-war Holland. I learned in the last few years that my dad could not become a Dutch citizen because he was German by birth. Germany had declared all Jews stateless. My dad, therefore, was a citizen without a homeland. He had to prove through documentation and testimonies from those who had known him that he was no longer a danger to the Netherlands. Fortunately, these documents were produced by the local mayor and the police chief of the town where he had been in the resistance. And I think Moshe showed those letters of recommendation. Yet it took till 1949, 5 years after the war, and 6 years after the murder of his mom and dad and little sister and grandmother, and the rest of the family, that he was finally considered good enough to become a Dutch citizen. When I, David, and Ela were in the Netherlands in 2022, we visited many sites of relevance to this story. The three of us stood in front of the building where my grandfather was a partner in a fur business. Wait, please, next one. Don't doze off. This business was confiscated by the Germans. This was the fur business in this building was city bonds. I think Moshe mentioned that. So my grandfather was a partner in that, and so it's still there. Yeah, and now, ironically, it's the site of a very progressive bookstore, and this particular section holds all German literature. How ironic can you get? Linda, Martijn, and the three Jacksons also visited the apartment building where my grandparents and little Susie lived. And we've seen that one. Yeah, those are my grandparents and little Susie. Okay, one more. And we've seen that one. It's exactly the same. While we were there, the building was being renovated, so it looks, but it's exactly the same spots. Okay, next one, please. This is the apartment where my grandparents, where the family lived in the Paterklosstraat. There's a sign here. So we were standing in front of number 2024 there. So the apartment was stolen by a Dutch Nazi for one of his friends. I think Linda and Martijn mentioned that. He ensured that the apartment was empty for his friend by delivering my family to the Dutch Nazi authorities. On May 18, 1943, Julius, Elsie, and 15-year-old Susie were transported via Westerbork transition camp to Sobibor to their death within a matter of days. We have a letter that says that they only spent 10 hours in the translation camp before being sent to the gas chambers in Poland after a 3-day journey. On May 1943, the next day, my great-grandmother followed their fate. Standing in front of the building opened an emotional floodgate for me. Looking up at the second story there, that's here there, the second story, we were wondering who lived there now. Should we ring the doorbell and find out? What if it turned out that the occupants, in the Netherlands, people don't move around very much. Once you're in an apartment, you stay there for forever, more or less. So what if it turned out that the occupants were the descendants of the Nazi who was responsible for the murder of my family? What will we say to them? How would they respond? And what would that achieve? If the son or daughter of the Nazi, whose name we actually know, Cornelis Bakker, I think Martijn mentioned that, were to live there, it would be my and Moshe's age, and they would have had nothing to do with what their dad did. But would their dad have talked about the war? What would they feel about their dad? We know what happened to their dad. This guy went to jail for a rather short time after the war for being a Nazi. Would they even know? Just before we were about to ring the bell, a neighbor told us that they weren't home. And that the neighbor never seen those people. So we didn't ring the bell. At one point, we were thinking we were gonna go full Tarantino on them if it was these Nazis living there. But we didn't. We're glad we didn't. I was asked to talk a little bit about what it was like to be the son of a Holocaust survivor, and what I think of what my dad went through and how it may have altered his life. I never knew that my dad was a hero, and I'm certain that he never considered himself to be one. I regret now that I never asked him about his experiences and his feelings in those days. He must have known that his family was gone. Maybe that's what motivated him not to talk. I'll never know. He stole bicycles from a nearby German army encampment, derailed trains, stayed behind with a machine gun to ensure that others escaped. He helped downed Allied pilots escape back to England. Why didn't he ever tell me about all of this? Maybe it was because I had never experienced the war and would not fully understand what it must have been like to lose your family. There's a new Holocaust memorial in Amsterdam with the names of all the Dutch people. It's a bizarre memorial. It's kind of architectural interesting with lots of mirrors and reflections and all these bricks with names on it. And that's my family there. So there's a new memorial in Amsterdam with the names of all the Dutch people who were murdered and have left families behind of which they can be no part. I now feel some anger because I too lost a family because of the war. A family that I never knew or even had a chance to get to know. And I now realize that my dad was a much bigger man than I am. He never expressed any anger. In the end, though, I have this enormous sense of pride for my dad and his friends. I'm so very, very proud of all that my dad has done. Excuse me. The awards are certainly deserved. Okay, I'm ending with a quote what my dad probably would have said after learning that he was to receive awards for heroism. He would most certainly have said, don't be silly, that's not necessary at all. I'm no hero. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, so as I said, we do not have much time. If anyone has a question in the audience, then please go ahead and ask. I don't know if there were people in the chat who had questions. If there's too many, we might have time for one. I will get back to everyone who had asked a question, and I will respond in an email. But it's just that we have run out of time quite severely, so we do have to end here. So, is there any questions here? Yes.
What got you to move to Canada from the Netherlands?
Not quite from the Netherlands. I went to Denmark. I went to university in Denmark, and there I met a wonderful young lady who was born in Denmark, but had immigrated to Canada with her mom and dad, and we met at university, and she wanted to go back home to Winnipeg, and I was in love. I tell people I was kidnapped. So
Do you miss the Netherlands?
yes and no, and we were talking about it a little bit. It's yes and no. Amsterdam is an absolutely gorgeous city, but I find it feels a little bit claustrophobic. Its streets are very small. There's tons of people in the street, and people are, well, Elke knows, we're both Dutch. We like to be in each other's face a lot, and I find that a little bit enclosed. So no, I don't miss it very much. Actually, yesterday was exactly 28 years ago since I emigrated to Canada. So no, I don't really miss it. I go visit, but that's about it.
All right. Thank you so much for for staying. I appreciate that. Again, my apologies that we ran over time. I just want to say one thing before everyone goes. I just want to thank Helen Nasser for always being like this, you know, person who helps out when it's needed most. Thank you. I appreciate you so much. And of course, our speakers. I appreciate Moshe, Linda, and Martijn, and of course, Rob for sharing their stories today. It was very, very powerful. I will be uploading the recording, so people who weren't able to see the whole thing will be able to see all of the presentations. And once again, I'm very pleased that we had a good crowd coming out to hear these very, very personal stories. And I hope that this also encourages people to, you know, do further research and, you know, discover all these stories that we are unaware of. All right, thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. That was great.
See you again.
Thank you so much.